Hey there, this week I made a backdrop for a diorama that I'm going to be working on over the next couple of weeks. And the great thing about this is that it looks a lot more complicated when it's finished than it actually is, which is ideal when you're making dioramas. It's a very simple style of painting, and even if you're not very adept at painting, you'll find this to be an easy one to do. So I hope you get something from this, and I hope you enjoy the video. I cut a couple of pieces of plywood to size and just put them into the frame with my piece of XPS foam to check that it all fits nice and snug, and gave it a single coat of just an acrylic base paint, something to work on other than just a piece of wood. I watered down some grass green just to put my guidelines in so I could put the sizes of the trees and make them a little smaller in places, so it gives some distance and later on gives some depth. I filled some of these trees in, the little background ones in green, just so I had a guide to paint in between the trees. Otherwise just a series of lines would be confusing, and it was, even though I put some green trees down. I'm just using a medium yellow and some white. I'm just sort of putting in the lighter sunlight dropping down. I put some white heavily on top of this. I want it to be fairly thick because I need to work with it and keep it fluid. So don't be sparing with the paint. Keep it on and lay it on and keep moving. I'm going to sort of make it a little more yellow as it goes down, so there's sunlight sort of coming up from the forest floor. I'm working at breakneck speed aside from this being in fast forward because it dries so fast. I use very cheap paint, so it dries really quickly, but if you use good quality paint you'll have a lot more working time than I did. I make sure that it's wet enough to blend, but I'm roughly blending this. It's not perfect. I want it to look like dappled sunlight that would be through leaves far off in the distance. I use my fingers to really help lay the paint on and just sort of dab at it with all my fingers, and yeah, it gives a really good effect. I use my fingers a lot in this. They work well. You can see that sort of mottled sunlight effect already happening, and I'm doing it at an angle running through that would give the illusion that there may be a large beam of sunlight running through at an angle. The trees, I'm putting a brown wash. It's just like a dark brown. And then I just put a wash down, so yeah, everything is going to be basically covered, and then I can start building up from there. I'll probably end up repeating myself a lot with this, but I will have to say, don't worry too much about being very neat. You want to make it so it's natural, and being exact will make things look unnatural. So just go with it and yeah, have fun with it. I'm putting in some very dark brown. It almost looks black. So I'm just sort of creating shadows and tying the bases of the trees down to the ground. Just run up the base of the trees a little. I basically just sort of pull everything together, and you keep redistributing the paint throughout the painting. So when you're using a colour, sort of put it here and there and everywhere so everything stays in the same sort of palette. You don't keep changing colours and put it in one section and not another. You want to keep working all over. I hope that made sense. Once this is done, you can see everything already pulling together. I'm just dry brushing with a big fluffy dry brush over it just to soften everything. And already now you can begin to see I'm just really lightly putting in some very lightly stippled, it's almost a fluffy effect of tiny leaves and of shadows and bushes in the background. Just keep darkening spots up of the ground. Oh, paint. It's a work shirt now. I lightened the ground slightly, and I'm just going to put in some stippled green leaves. I just used that same green and some medium yellow and mixed them up to make a really nice lime green colour. It's quite light. It looks heavier than this is, and the background's still slightly wet as well, which helps to blend it into the background a little. I'm using the same big fluffy dry brush just to soften the leaves. Don't worry about going over the trees because the trees are going to be done last, so you want to go over them so you haven't got light gaps between the leaves and the trees creating unnatural lines. I just start darkening to bring it forward. I just put a little bit more of that sap green into the lime mixture I'd made to bring it forward, and I'm doing it again even darker. In the distance you want to work from light to dark and bring it darker, and when you work in the foreground you want to start out dark and then make things lighter and build them up. You'll see what I mean when the trees are being done. After I had darkened them enough, I just got a bit of a creamy sort of a white, and I just softened them a little bit, put some more highlights into them. It's all very random, not greatly thought out. It's the way of keeping it natural looking. I start dropping in some leaves with a bit of golden ochre and a little bit of white mixed into it, a little bit of green. I'm working from the same palette. I keep dipping back into the same colours to make sure I do keep redistributing the colours throughout the entire painting. I soften them again. Do make sure when you're doing the ground and leaves like that that you use horizontal brush strokes, no matter how small they are, because it will work for the angle of the ground. If you do vertical lines, everything will look wrong. Keep dipping back into the palette, just different browns, creams, ochres, black. There's cream and medium yellow mixed with white and some green, all sort of mixed together to create the very soft stippled leaves in the background, and I soften going up quite a bit with it. Now to darken up these trees. I need to neaten them up now. I don't want them to be very harsh lines, but this is my opportunity to tidy them a bit. When you're pulling the brush away, you go from the bottom to the top and the paint will disappear as it goes up, and it'll appear as though there is light hitting the top of the tree. These are pretty roughly done, these ones, but yeah, this is a very basic painting. You just twist this brush as it goes up, just load it with paint and give a nice twist and pull away as you go upward, and you get a really nice twisted looking small sapling. Good for doing small branches too. Once again, I'm back at it because I'm changing colours, so I'm putting them back in. This is a grey, elephant grey, I think this one's called, with a little bit of cream in it, just to put light. I'm putting light on the left side of all the trees, very roughly. You can see it come together very quickly now. I'm using a bit of that golden ochre on top of it. It wasn't going down the way I liked with the brush, so I started using my finger. I just dropped paint down and then I started pulling it with my finger, and then I ended up wetting my fingers and using them almost as an eraser as I was spreading the paint. I did this very roughly, but that's the point, because it's a tree and you don't want it to look man-made. Just keep adding light and building it as you go. The more center light that you use, the more rounded it will look as a tree too. Just build to the center. Build up in the center if you want. It depends where you want the light to come from. You can see how roughly I'm doing this. It's what makes it work so well. You see me pulling away the light and making what looks almost like a large indentation in the tree, and then working around that with a little more light put on top of it. This is so easy. You'd be surprised how easy this really is, but you have to make sure that you don't overthink it and don't try too hard. Just let it happen. I made quite a mistake there, but it doesn't matter. Just keep working with it. I think Bob Ross knew what he was talking about when he talked about things like happy accidents, because that's what this is all about. It's just taking advantage of accidents, learning from them, and making it part of your work. A little more light on the left side of the smaller trees. There is no detailing done in these. You could sit there for hours and do it if you really wanted to, but being a diorama background, a lot of this may not be seen, so I don't see much of a point in doing too much detail. Plus, a lot of detail would affect the perspective. Things may look the wrong size when this is done, depending on what I'm actually going to do for the diorama. It's all about light and shadow. Really is. These little ferns, I'm using the shape of the brush. There's nothing special about them, just some green and a little lime green and then a little more yellow added to the lime green just to drop in bits of light. As long as you avoid making patterns, because it won't look natural if you make patterns. I use my finger again to rough them up. It's about fooling the eye once again. When someone looks at this, their brain will sort out what a fern is meant to look like instead of you doing every tiny little leaf on a frond. That's the beauty of this kind of thing. It works very, very well. Remember that everything that goes off into the distance gets smaller, as these leaves would. It just pulls perspective back into line to make things look correct. This would have come out really nicely if it was done in oil paints. It would have had a really rich look to it. But then I'd have to wait a week for it to dry, and no one's got time for that. Just keep building till you're happy with it, but sometimes less is more, so also remember that. Now I've got my backdrop ready for my diorama. This is a lot of fun. I haven't painted in ages, so I enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it, because it's a pretty handy one to be able to do. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.